Please help me welcome Jenny Kast.
I have been called many names in my lifetime, but this morning I want you to call me Jenny K, Private Eye. Sometimes it's just misplaced keys, other times it's reuniting stray dogs with their lost owners in my neighborhood. But something I'm getting very good at is finding long-forgotten family members in the disorder that is Honduras. Madam Toastmaster, fellow members, and guests that we're most excited to have today, before you embark on your own private eye agency, let me tell you about a time that I found a child's sorta, kinda family in 5 easy steps. Dennis Gabriel is a handsome young fella who's grown up in children's homes since he was 6 years old. He knows how to charm you into doing pretty much anything that he wants you to do. He knows what traits he finds attractive in a girl, and he talks about those excessively. He also knows what he wants to be when he grows up, which happens to be a famous rapper, so we're working on changing that goal a little bit. What he doesn't know is who his family is or where they are. He knows he was abandoned as a baby. He knows that a family took him in and raised him as their own until he was 6 years old, where he found himself in the first of a series of children's homes. At the age of 17, he was sick of all of the not knowing, and he wanted some answers. For some reason, he asked me to help him out with this, which was essentially like him saying, "Hey, so I lost this needle in that haystack over yonder. Do you think you could maybe help me find it?" Step 1, go through the child's file. What this means is that I had a manila folder that was ripping, barely held together in my hands, that had all of the history of this child's life in it. It was just a conglomeration of government paperwork, discipline reports, notes from past homes, and there was one picture of an adorably squishy 6-year-old version of Dennis Gabriel. But then at the end of one of the pieces of paper that was kind of blurry because it was a copy of some sort of paperwork that someone had, there was a line that said, "Parent's name, Daisy Martinez," and then an address. He said that he was pretty sure that this was the name of the woman who took him in at one point. So that was my first clue. Step 2, find the address. But you have to understand that in Honduras, an address isn't exactly what we're used to. You can't just say, "Hey, taxi driver, take me to my hotel that's located on 123 West Main Street." You have to say something more like, "Hey, taxi driver, take me to my hotel, which is located on the road on the way to Tella that's 2 blocks past Central Park, right before the light and across the street from the soccer field." I was not feeling very encouraged or hopeful about being able to find this address. But every time I arrived at the center, he would greet me with, "So when are you going to go look for them?" Finally I said, "Tuesday, I'll go on Tuesday." And then I had to follow through. Which means step number 3. Drive in circles looking for this address that's not really an address. This involves driving the wrong way down one-way streets, passing the same landmark 12 times, and then finally pulling into the parking lot of an apartment building that used to be there, but was now an active construction site of a bank. Not only did Daisy no longer live in this place, the place didn't even exist. So there weren't even any neighbors that I could ask to try to get my next clue. But then step number 4, don't give up. As I stared forlornly at this building, a foreman walks out and asks me if he can help me. I said, "Well, I was on this futile search that has now ended." And he said, "Well, but there's some more apartment buildings 2 blocks down the road. Why don't you just go check those out?" The snarky, frustrated side of me wanted to say, "Right." Because after getting kicked out of her apartment and having thousands of options in the 2nd largest city in Honduras, she's just going to move 2 blocks down the street. But he was looking at me so expectantly that the more kind, culturally sensitive part of me kicked in, and I thanked him and headed down the street towards those apartments. Along the way, I passed some women that said, "Daisy, yeah, I think that's the woman that sells breakfast outside of her house. It's Daisy or Daniela or something like that. Just across the street and 3 doors down. So I arrive, knock on the door. This little girl comes and very cautiously asks me what I want. And I think, oh great, now I'm going to explain this wild goose chase to a 7-year-old. But I start and say, I'm looking for a woman named Daisy. She took care of a kid named Dennis about 10 years ago, before you were even born. She disappears into the back of the house and is gone for so long that I figured that they're all just hiding in some back bedroom waiting for me to leave. But finally, a woman comes through the living room and very much suspicion in her voice says, my name's Daisy. What do you want to know about Dennis? Couldn't believe it. I had found Daisy. She remained guarded for a while until she realized that I wasn't there to get her in any sort of trouble, and then the stories just started pouring out of her mouth. She talked about how much she loved him, how she wanted to adopt him, but how she mistakenly had trusted a friend that told her that if she just gives him to the government for a little bit, then they'll give him back to her permanently. Suddenly she gets wistful and she says, by now he's probably 20. And I said, no, he just turned 17 a couple months ago. Her eyes got big as she sat up and she said, you know him? And I said, well, of course I do. That's why I'm here. He sent me to come find you. I have never heard a Honduran woman squeal so loud. And she nearly jumped into my arms and then started rubbing her own, saying, look, I have goosebumps. Honduran women don't get goosebumps. So step number 5, which is actually more of a bonus. Reunite this child with his sorta kinda family as soon as possible. But first you have to understand a little bit more about Dennis Gabriel. He is the cool cat of the foundation. He's the most popular, leader of the pack, the trendsetter, which made this reunion with Daisy that much more tender. As soon as she saw him, she gave him the most fierce hug that when she finally let him go, there was not a dry eye in the area, including his own. We went inside and she piled old photo albums into his lap and started going through all the pictures, asking him if he had remembered certain people and different memories. And the whole time we were there, family members and other longtime friends would come over, pop their head in, and she would say, see, I told you, he's really here. I found my long-lost son. After 2 hours, we left with doggy bags brimming over with food and lots of plans to spend all holidays together. This child who had been anchorless for so long finally had a home base. He had memories and pictures and sorta kinda siblings that he could talk to and banter with about who really broke Mom's base that one time. He had support and encouragement and a future with his family. And all it took was following those 5 easy steps. That's it.